One of the things that I thought might be interesting for us to touch on now, actually, and you were talking about this idea of innovation and organisations really trying to zone in on employees' understanding and really being driven by that purpose. And I think a lot of people, a lot of businesses have thought about technology and the role that it could play to, if we can automate certain tasks that people perhaps are monotonous and they don't want to focus on, we can then free up their time to be more innovative or, to understand that purpose and to be more engaged. And we've seen lots of talk around generative AI. You've got the likes of ChatGPT or Google Bard, which they've recently launched at the time of obviously us recording now. So can I just get some reflections on that link? And I'll probably start with you, Chris, if that's all right, between this idea of, technology is going to be the panacea to help drive increased productivity within our business.
So I'm going to start and split it into two, because I think there's a general discussion about technology, and then I think there's a very topical discussion about generative AI. I think looking at technology more broadly, in the workplace, we have more technology being thrown at us than we ever have before. I read something recently that it's saying the average person at work uses 80 different applications. Yet in our personal lives, on average, we use between 5 and 6 on a regular basis, yeah? So we think our personal lives are fairly well run. We enjoy the things that we do, yet our experience is totally different at work, where we have, a plethora of different applications. So I think whereas in the past, I think technology was put in place, and generally it took about 18 months for, employees to really take that on board and almost get, so their productivity dropped, but then it came back up. I actually think now there's so much bombardment of technology that we're not seeing the uptick as quickly. And I think people are not getting used to new technology and not getting the productivity that we would generally like from that investment.
Is it counterproductive, or is it just not bringing the value?
So I think it is actually, I think it's both counterproductive. I think there's a whole range of different things that can go wrong. So I think, touching on change and adoption, have you involve people right in the new technology, etc. So all the standard kind of things that we would do. But then I just think the sheer bombardment that we've done through all the different applications. And I think chatting with clients, the key thing that they're looking for is simplification. Yeah. So either, technology that you can put a layer across things to make it all seem very similar and easier to use, or just ways to actually think, do we need that app? Do we need this particular tool? So I think there's a real simplification process that needs to happen because of the amount of stuff. I think then from a generative AI and talking about automation, I think there's lots of things that there's potential to be automated. I think the biggest thing is we're kind of all going into unknown territory. So I think to me it's around taking a step back and thinking about, compliance and ethical side of what you're doing. So if I was a CPO, I'd be thinking about what kind of policy should I have in place? We've had discussions internally, should we be able to use ChatGPT or Bard to create certain things, but not others? And I think there's the chats around company boardrooms and, lower down the organization are very similar. I do think certain tasks will be automated. I do think certain tasks will be made quicker for all of us. I think the whole support from an AI perspective is going to become like these glasses or my watch or whatever. We're not even going to think about it. It's just going to be the way. I think it's always interesting, the haves and the have-nots. So is there a certain percentage of the population that's going to be significantly impacted? And then that touches on how do you reskill, how do you build new opportunities? And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges over the next decade or so.
I mean, that's the key thing I was reading the other day, is actually the introduction of technology doesn't just eliminate jobs. It eliminates certain types of jobs, right? It might make us more efficient. It might mean we don't have to spend hours, wordsmithing that email. Instead, ChatGPT does it, or Bard does it, whichever. But actually what that gives us time for is the other stuff. So maybe we do become more productive. But the other element is that the introduction of technology means we've just got a whole other range of jobs that we don't know about today. And I always say this as one of the older people in the room, that 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have some of the jobs we have around today. We didn't know what a social media manager was or a digital marketeer. They didn't exist. And so there are a whole new kind of raft of jobs that will come around the introduction of technologies like AI. It almost regenerates jobs. So you have new jobs we don't know about. We have new skills we need to build in to support, to use, or to optimize some of that technology. So it becomes a different shape. And we see some scary headlines at the moment about organizations that are cutting thousands of jobs in preparation for or in the context of AI, but we don't know what's behind that. Is it straight cuts, or is it actually we've got to reshape what our workforce looks like?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as well, because there's lots of talk about generative AI because it's new, it's the new thing, it's fancy. But this is part of the journey we've been on for automation for 20 years now. Loads of jobs that aren't service-based jobs, that are manual-based jobs or physical jobs, have been automated. It's just that this is now impacting on jobs which we didn't necessarily thought could be automated five years ago. So I think if you set it in the context of that, and you look back and have a look at what's happened with those jobs, people are really resilient. People want to work, and they want to find new jobs for themselves, and they will reskill and they will find new jobs. New jobs will enter the market. I think to Chris's point in terms of that reskilling item, really successful organizations will enable that reskilling. They will help their employees, and they'll help develop them rather than just cutting them and leaving them by the wayside. And so I think we can look at that example from jobs that have already been automated or gone through automation, and say, where have they been improved, where have they changed, and actually then what new jobs came out of that. And it's going to be the same when generative AI becomes more commonplace in the workplace, I think.
And the other element is, again, I read this the other day, that you can't replace the human-centric kind of view of some roles, right? So yes, it could diagnose a condition from a list of symptoms, but can it care as it gives that diagnosis, or as it identifies treatment? And then the counter argument was until it teaches itself too. So that's when you start to get nervous, right?
Teaching itself bedside manner.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I do think there is that element of that. There will always be some roles that have to have a human element to it, that have to have a people-focused element that maybe tech will never replace. I'm saying maybe in case I'm wrong.
I think also the interesting question, so if we're talking about tying it back to productivity or redefining productivity, so we've still got the financial or fiscal side. Hopefully, if we're not having to do some of the more boring or mundane tasks, we've got more time to engage and work on that human side of connection and working with others. But then I also think, does that not free up time for innovation and actually give us that space? Because the number of times I've heard recently people say, I don't have time to do X, which is a fundamental part of my job, which is really thinking about where should we be in 5 years? What skills should we be having as a company? What should we be doing? To me, by freeing up for some of the things that we don't really need to do. I mean, I look in early days of my career, the internet wasn't around. We didn't get, I get hundreds of emails a day now. We didn't get hundreds of emails. We got like maybe 5 emails, 10 emails a day. So just the sheer volume, if we can do anything to simplify and pull back from those things that really aren't driving productivity, they're not driving good work practice, they're not driving, it's just sheer bombardment about certain things. If we can, automate those, make things easier, surely that gives us more time to interact as human beings, and also hopefully the time to focus on innovation.
Because we've been talking about this in HR. It feels like ever since I've been in HR, we need more time to have those strategic conversations. We don't want to be transactional anymore. We don't want to be kind of the gatekeepers for employee processes. We want to enable our workforces to do that themselves. And we want to have, basically, we understand that the value add activities in those strategic conversations, in that advisory work. So these aren't new things. We hopefully are now reaching the point where actually we can have those. But to Chris's point, exactly, we almost need to have a bit of self-reflection to say, okay, what is the technology that we're using driving? Is it helping us have those conversations? And if it's not, can we simplify it?